went home, faced it, got arrested. A month later, 18 police officers came at 5 a.m., kicked off our door, big red battering ram. The door was really strong, so credit to the landlord. Took a long while for them to get in. They broke in the door and then arrested everyone. And then there was trials for 2 years, and it was a 2 year case. And then that ended up in me being in prison.
Okay, Pratik,
Perfect. Sam.
2 years goes by really quick. I was 24 like yesterday and now I'm 26. How long or slow does 2 years feel like when you're in prison?
It's slow. Slow as hell. It doesn't matter if it's 2 years, 10 years. I feel sorry for the people that's 10 years, but really slow, super slow. You're counting the days. When I was younger, I always wish I could freeze time, like in an exam. Like I'd be sitting in the exam thinking, shit, I haven't revised. I wish I could freeze time right now and get a calculator or something. And then in there, that thought would always pop up in my mind to say, time's basically frozen now, Pratik. So like make the most of it, but super slow.
Yeah, it's like an interesting time capsule. Before we get into all things prison and kind of what you've been up to next, tell me a bit about kind of your childhood, where you grew up, and yeah, I want to touch on prison just a bit later.
Of course, of course. So grew up in Northwest London to two Indian parents. Growing up was okay, right? It was good. My parents did everything they could to provide whatever I needed, right? Essentially sacrificed a lot of their lives to make sure that I had a good start, if that makes sense. So my family influences were really good. Based on that, I probably shouldn't have ended up in prison. Okay. I come from a family of like consultants, accountants, doctors, and things like that. I was always the black sheep. So yeah, family influences are great, but the area that I lived in, it wasn't the worst, right? By far, it wasn't the worst, but it wasn't the best either. So I did grow up kind of seeing people. So, okay, growing up in London, violence, crime, things like that are heralded, right? In the school playground, who's the baddest? Who's who can misbehave the most? Who's the most violent? That's always a heralded characteristic. So it was a real culture clash where crazy things are happening at school on the way home from school, whether it's to do with violence, knives, and things like that. And then I come home into this like conservative Hindu like home. So yeah, although my upbringing was good and my parents provided everything they needed to, because of the other influences, perhaps it caused me to make questionable choices. Let's just call it like that. But yeah.
So you're going through that at school, you're mentioning the violence and the knives, all that type of stuff. Did your parents manage, did they pick up on any type of signs of what you might have been going through whilst you're at school? And when you come back home and, you know, everything's okay?
Only if I let it on. You can't really tell your parents, right? It's alien to them.
Yeah.
Okay. It's completely alien to them. Like my dad would grow up reading newspapers and showing his friends. He'd be like, look, oh my God, there's an underground tube in London and I'm going to go to London one day. So do you know how you have the American dream? They really believe in a Western dream. So this sort of stuff is super alien to them. So only when they'd have to find out. Other than that, I would keep things super under wraps.
Was there a particular time at school, like maybe an incident where like the violence like really manifested, like, or was it just like a gradual?
It was happening all the time, right? Like, yeah, okay, year eight, phone robberies are a massive thing, right? So walking home, I've even had like a knife pulled on me as a 13-year-old for my phone, right? And then different schools would have fights with each other. You'd get caught up in that because of the color of your tie. So it was consistent throughout, to be honest. And I'm not gonna lie, I had a loud mouth as a kid, so I would ask for it if that makes sense. So like fighting, violence, it was very normal. Like my school was essentially like a jungle, if that makes sense.
So was it school versus school, or was there also, did it almost form like racial gangs of like whites, blacks, Asians?
Not really. There was not really, but there were definitely kids in school that were in gangs, right? and then they would have older brothers who were in gangs, and like crime was normal to them. So then they would bring that influence into school, if that makes sense. So there wasn't really racial gangs, but there was definitely students with gang affiliations as young as 13, 14.
So what was that conflict like with your parents? Because obviously, my mum's from Brazil, so I'm like a first generation immigrant. I know what people who come from these type of countries are like, right, in terms of what their expectations are for a son.
Yeah.
It's very much doctor, lawyer, accountant. Did they try and put you on a straight and narrow in terms of that path? And did you have any resistance?
100%. They got me like private tuition. Education is a massive, massive, massive thing. It's like the only thing. It's the most important thing growing up. So yeah, 100% they tried, and I was super rebellious from young. From young, I feel like a lot of my childhood was rooted in rebellion. That I'm still trying to understand and grasp why. And like now that I'm an adult, now that I'm thinking of having children myself, I understand why they would prioritize education and things like that. So I get their perspective. I guess apart from, let's call it the obvious that, okay, cool, if you push a child too hard and you get them to, and you try to put them on a path without fully explaining it, it's just like, no, do this because you need to do this. Like certain types of children would rebel. But yeah, to answer your question, they definitely tried to put me on the straight and narrow, but I was rebellious from young.
So you grew up in London, a really diverse place, and then you decided to go to university in Plymouth,
Yeah,
southwest of the UK,
yeah.
predominantly white. What was your first impression when you first moved to Plymouth, kind of coming outside of your London bubble?
It was a culture shock. It was a massive, massive, massive culture shock. So like people, the locals wouldn't understand that I'm Indian. They're like, you're either white or you're black, if that makes sense. So that was a massive culture shock. The first real time I experienced racism, whether it's old drunk men saying, you get out of my country, my dad fought in the war and things like that. Like, honestly, racism was embedded throughout my experience, whether it might be from the locals, authorities. So that was a massive culture shock. Obviously, growing up in London, apart from the odd joke here or there, there was no racism. Like there would be such a lack of English people in our school that I would literally play count the white person. So it went from super diverse, and everyone mixing and everyone understanding their culture, but everyone still were proud to be English, if that makes sense. Like I was always growing up, I was always proud to be English, to the point where when India and England are playing cricket, I would support England. But then that kind of the racism that I experienced in Plymouth made me think maybe I'm not as accepted in other parts of the country as much as I think I am. So yeah, massive culture shock.
Yeah. Just to divulge on like that piece, like now there are so many media heads, politicians, talking about this whole like immigration issue and what does it actually mean to be British. And you're saying yourself, your parents are Indian, but you're born and raised in London, and you felt British growing up.
Yeah.
And it was only until you started to receive racist abuse that you started to question it.
Yeah. And my parents were born with British passports. I'm a big history nerd, right? So Yemen was a say like a stronghold in World War One for the British Empire to kind of keep tabs on the Ottoman Empire. So as part of that, they invited over many Indians because they obviously had control of India at the time as well, to go to, it was called Aden, the port of Aden, which is now Yemen, and work there. And in exchange, they said, if your children are born here, they'll get British passports. So so I guess even though they didn't see themselves as British, they firmly thought that their place was like justified in this country. They obviously felt a bit of tension. One thing that I guess a lot of these communities don't do, which is integrate, which I kind of disagree with. I feel like if you're in a country, you should kind of try to integrate and not isolate yourself. But sorry, I've gone off on a tangent. What was your question?
About you feeling British up until what point
Yeah.
you received your
So it was that lack
abuse.
of acceptance, right? And growing up as a first generation immigrant, you always feel that culture clash anyway. Like regardless of me being able to read, write, and speak my language fluently, because my parents told me it was a good idea and I hated it, I rebelled against it, but I thank them for it now. I wouldn't feel Indian when I'm back home. And then and then when I went to Plymouth, I didn't feel accepted, like, oh, these people don't see me as British, even though I grew up here. Culturally, we're similar apart from the Indian nuances from my background. And then that lack of acceptance confused me, and then I guess caused a shift in my identity. But I think for the better, because I feel like an individual's identity should always remain fluid, as like tabula rasa, born with a blank slate, right? As humans. And then you don't pick the family that you're born into. You don't pick the socioeconomic like situation that you're born into. You don't pick the location in the world that you're born into. So you're socialized with all of these things. And a lot of the time people latch on to different identities. And unless those identities cause you to be grounded in some sort of congruent or conducive value system, I feel like having that attachment to a certain identity can be bad because it puts the blinders on and you can be in an echo chamber. So at that point, the lack of acceptance made me confused about where I am in terms of my identity. Over the years, I saw that as a positive thing because I was like, I'm a human, I'm Pratik. Normally, a lot of these podcast people ask me, who is Pratik? How do you want us to introduce yourself? I'm thinking, I don't know. Like, I'm just Pratik, right? I'm a son, I'm a friend, I work in a social enterprise, like I'm 29, all of these things, but they're all just labels. So yeah, at first it felt confusing and negative, but over the years, as I've matured, I'm seeing it as a positive.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So at university, you went to study accountancy.
Yeah.
What at what point did you start to get involved in drugs at uni?
So my journey, I'll track back a little bit. I was really studious in my GCSEs from that family influence of prioritizing education. Probably from about 16, I started smoking a lot of weed, and then that really took me off the path of education. Did horrible in my A levels. And then I really wanted to prove to my parents that I'm not a failure, basically. I'm not a fuck up, basically. So I didn't know what to do. At one point, I wanted to be a pharmacist. I did that in one way or another. But and then I wanted to be a dentist. And then I thought I didn't have the grades to be a dentist to study dentistry, right? Because again, I picked difficult A-level subjects to fit into a box that I don't fit into. So I thought, oh, my parents are accountants. How can I fail if I'm following in their footsteps? But that drug use and that idea to sell drugs was always embedded because it's normal, right? When you grow up in the environment that you grow up in, if that makes sense. It's not an abnormal thing to, oh, let me sell a little bit of weed to make a little bit of money, because culturally, cannabis isn't seen as harmful as, say, class A drugs or something like that. So I always had that to think, cool, maybe this could be a moneymaker, right? But thankfully enough, because of my like parental involvement, yes, I did have run-ins with the police when I was 14 to 16, but it wasn't that serious for me to be labeled as like a young offender or something like that, or criminal, whatever label society wants to give it. So that was always there. The drug use was always there. Another thing I feel like people should learn, like college kids, sixth form kids should learn, is financial literacy. Because as soon as I went to university, I blew all of my money. So a lot of us in our university house were looking at different business ideas, right? And I guess my business idea was doing the best. So I kind of just fell into it, if that makes sense. Yeah. So probably straight from the get-go, the first couple of months in.
Yeah.
Just fell into it essentially.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely not unique in that. Like I was saying before, I went to university in Brighton, and either side of my flat, there were two people that sell weed. And if you go on a night out, you knew where to go.
Yeah.
And in Brighton, it's a very liberal place, and if people smoke weed in the streets and the police see, there's like no repercussions. It's just considered normal there.
It's like Camden over here.
Yeah. And then, well, the reason I wanted to speak to you is you went to prison for this.
Yeah.
You are training to be an accountant. You're at university. You're not selling crack cocaine. You're not running around with knives like a lunatic or a gun.
Yeah.
You're selling weed from student to student, which is exactly what I experienced when I was at university for 4 years. Lots of people doing that. You got such a heavy-handed punishment. Could you talk me through how that whole process kicked off and the night it happened?
So there were issues happening with, say, local dealers, right? Those issues caused, I guess, the house that I lived in to be highlighted because there was loads of incidents and things like that. So then the police would do welfare checks, come into the house. Is everything okay? We know that there's been violence like near this address. We just want to check. We know you guys are students. They'd come in. They'd even say, "Oh, it smells of weed, guys. Put an incense stick on," and things like that. So then probably on their radar in one way or another, I wasn't probably aware of the capacity at which I was on their radar at the time. So then that was happening quite a lot. It was January 2016 now, Jesus, a long 9 years ago. I had this New Year's resolution to actually focus at university, irrespective of the drug dealing, right? Go to a gym, wake up early, go to my lectures. I could do both, I thought, right? I could be a drug dealer and excel at uni. So I was at the gym. One of these welfare checks turned into a search because I guess, let's say, the individuals that opened the door maybe weren't as savvy to ward the police off, if that makes sense. Turned into a search, and then I got a phone call saying police are looking for you. I was like, cool, I could leave right now. But not everyone else came to university to sell to drugs. There was medical students in the house. There was biochemistry students, economic students, right? Really going to university, as was I, to better their careers and to learn more, to better their careers. So I was like, cool, I could easily leave. Let me go home and face it. Went home, faced it, got arrested. A month later, 18 police officers came at 5 a.m., kicked off our door, big red battering ram. The door was really strong, so credit to the landlord. Took a long while for them to get in. They broke in the door and then arrested everyone. And then there was trials for 2 years, and it was a 2-year case. And then that ended up in me being in prison.
2 year trial.
Yeah.
Are you still studying during the 2 year trial?
Yes, I was. But then the university kicked me out on the day of my exam. So I deferred my exams, and then I went to university to sit an exam and to go to a bail hearing. It was weird that they're on the same day, or the day after another. So then the exam was, say, on day one, and the bail hearing was on day two. When I went to sit my exam, I got pulled into the office and they said, "We're kicking you out because of reputational harm." So I was trying to continue my studies, but they were informed, I think, by the police that it would be best to kick me out. So then after that point, I could no longer study.
That's so interesting because before we talk about prison, one of the key aspects of setting a human being up to success is giving them the type of qualifications they need at such an early stage in their life to use as a launch pad later
100%.
when they're in their 20s, and to take that away from you when you've not been proven innocent or guilty seems a bit odd.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there were examples. So like I would spend so much time typing in keywords into Google: jail, student, cannabis, jail, student, dealing, drugs, keyword searches, right, to find articles for similar cases. No one really got sent to prison. I knew people students that were dealers that took too much Valium or Xanax and like punched someone in the nose, broke their nose, and showed and brandished a knife to them and said that they're going to kill them. They didn't get sent to prison. This historical case of a female medical student was addicted to cocaine and stabbed her boyfriend. She was allowed to finish her studies before she got sentenced, but she was like not an aristocrat, but her family were important people, if that makes sense. And I think she studied in Oxbridge or somewhere like that. And don't quote me on that. But so there weren't that many instances of cases like mine of people going to prison. And like my co-defendant, who's my best mate, also was studying to be a doctor. He wasn't really involved. I thought that things like my background would cause me to not go into prison. So I definitely think there was other factors like that caused us to go there, and we could definitely get into that.
So the hammer comes down and the judge says you're going to prison for 2 years. Did you think you would be going to prison at that point? And what was your reaction when you were told? So how old are you? 20?
21.
21. You were told at 21 years old you're going to prison.
So my best mate was remanded the night before. Okay, so because he wasn't really involved, if that makes sense, never really actually sold a drug. It was me that was mainly doing, like, I guess operationally doing everything. So my lawyers told me, don't come to court on this final day. And I was like, okay, that's a bit weird. And then me and my other housemate were waiting at like our little kitchen table, thinking it's 6 o'clock now, he should be here. 6 o'clock now, he should be here. Then I see an article saying that he's been remanded. So, and then I called my lawyer saying, am I going to prison? They're like, you're not going to go to prison. Don't worry. You've got all these things. You're not going to go to jail. So up until the morning of, I wasn't expecting to go to prison. But, and then on the morning, they're like, you're probably going to go to prison. And I was like, fucking hell, great. So they told me that before the actual sentencing, like 10, 20 minutes before, I had a meeting with them. Then my dad was there at the court. I told him, I went there to the toilet, told my mum. So I was like, fuck, I'm actually going to jail. And I was like, okay, now's the time to kind of just be strong, you know? Now's the time to just kind of be in the moment and like take each moment by moment, step by step. So then I went into the court. You're in this little glass pane. And then the judge said all of this stuff and he said concurrent. And like, I did not know what concurrent means. So it means that you get your sentence run simultaneously. So he gave me 2 years and 1 year concurrent. So at first I was thinking, the first thing I was thinking, I was like, how long am I fucking going in for? I was trying to figure that out, right? So that was the main thought process, and making sure my family are okay. I was just thinking about them, right? And making sure that they're going to be able to handle it, that they're going to be able to cope, right? Obviously there was subconscious fear of going into that environment, but I wasn't really focused on that at all. I was more so thinking about my parents and see how they were going to handle it and see how long I was actually going to do behind the door. So those are the main thoughts. It's weird. It's like everything slows down. Everything goes into slow motion. And then it just happened, and we got walked downstairs, the cells underneath the court. And then, yeah, just kind of figuring out how long we're going to get. The officers were nice enough to let us sit in the same cell together, me and my co-defendant, my best friend. Because they were like, oh, we've been following your story, man. Even they were like, oh, you guys got, the book got thrown at you. Like, this must be really difficult. You're university students and now you're plunged into this whole new world. Sit next to each other. We'll get you a cup of tea, blah, blah, blah. So then we were just trying to figure out how long we were going to spend.
Cool. What was your first conversation with your best mate when you get taken down to the cell?
I was like, what's it like in there? Like, you're right. Like, well, what's it saying in there, basically?
Yeah.
And then he, like, Sobernan fashion, was like, oh, it's all right. I've kind of figured things out. I made a few allies there. This is how you kind of speak to the officers. This is how you act. Like, he figured out all the social cues straight away. And he was basically priming me, like, this is what you do. This is the best way to behave so you don't get in trouble with the officers. But then there's people from London there, and like he clocked that that the Londoners congregate and stick together because we're so far out of our hometown, essentially. So that was the conversation. It was really us reassuring each other and him telling me the lowdown from the night that he spent there.
Yeah, yeah. Your first couple of weeks at prison, how was that?
Shit. It was shit. It's terrible, isn't it? Because it's just weird. Because it's like, it's just the food is shit. You kind of have to be wary of people. You're kind of connecting the dots in terms of who's who, if that makes sense. The power groups that are in there, how things are working, meeting people, speaking to people, who not to speak to, things like that. So just really observing things, trying to pass the time. And I'm really taking in the environment and being okay with the fact that this is going to be my life for a bit. Loads of journaling, loads of reading, loads of in-cell exercise, and just learning the lay of the land, basically.
Was your prison violent?
Yeah, super violent. Yeah. Albeit, well, Exeter was horrendously violent. Like, they've been put on special measures since the time we've been there. I don't know what their status is now, but I'm sure the powers that be are trying to do their best to solve all of those things. But yeah, it was horrendously violent at the time.
a couple of past people I've interviewed, they saw prison as almost a reset, meaning in their build up to going to prison, their life was just crumbling all around them. Relationships, no career, maybe homelessness, whatever. And they saw prison as a reset because they hit rock bottom and there was an opportunity for them to really do some internal work, read some books, and think about what they want to do. Now, your situation was different. You weren't at rock bottom. You were training to be an accountant, hoping to graduate in the next year or two, and then come back to London, I presume, and get a good paying job.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that? Because you weren't rock bottom.
I wasn't, but there was a part of me whilst I was doing all the drug dealing was making me think that, cool, is this my career path? Right. Am I going to be a drug dealer and be an accountant, or should I be an accountant? So there was that identity shift again happening. But dealing with that was difficult because you don't know your place in society. I was seen as, oh, this guy's a university student, the world's his oyster, to you're a criminal, if that makes sense. So that was really difficult to deal with. And I was really understanding why it's so hard for people to not reoffend, because the way in which society labels you, especially as a non-violent drug offender, if that makes sense. So that was super difficult, trying to figure out where I fit into society, what I'm going to do. And then in prison, you have loads of people coming up to me saying, just sell drugs, you know? Like all these like big Albanian guys saying, yeah, like we can give you a kilo for free and you can pay us back. And I'm thinking, fuck all of that, mate. Because they were really intrigued, because they were like, you took the right path. So there was different schools of thought. There was these real like hardened, let's call them like London criminals, right? That where they grew up and they were thrown into gangs from the age of 13. Some of them thought, you're not bad. You're not like us. You're not cut from the same cloth. Some of them were like, nah, I like this kid. He reminds me of the good kid in my block that shouldn't have been dragged into this. So they were really good. And then there was this school of thought of these older criminals, the veterans, where they were like, wow, these kids are kind of smart. You know, they fucked it, but they're smart, because really and truly they wouldn't get caught. And I would want to work with someone like that because they're not going to draw attention to themselves. So it was super confusing. I've got Sobernan in my ear saying, university, right? Let's figure out a way to empower the system and be a bridge for the people in the system and the system, right? Because we're best placed. So I have him, positive influence in one ear, reminding me about my parents. And then I've got all these other guys in another ear saying, sell drugs and things like that. And I have to credit him, because maybe if I was just by myself, I would have got roped into selling drugs and things like that. And that would have been a shame, because technically I shouldn't have been there in the first place, because I had all the protective characteristics growing up, right? Apart from the area that I lived in. And I guess my rebellious nature. So I could really see how someone who's not actually meant to be there, not a criminal, go in there and come out worse, right? Because it's the university of life, the university of crime.
Yeah.
So dealing with that was super difficult and understanding where I fit. But as my time went on, I guess I understood what I'm going to do. Like the older ones would say, like, he's got another bird in him, because the way in which I would speak to people and the questions I would ask, and they're like, you're asking all the wrong questions. Like, why are you asking about what a price of this is and a price of that is and things like that? I'm very like curious about stuff anyway. So, but yeah, to answer your question, super difficult. Loads of different influences and different voices guiding a person somewhere. And I can really see why an individual like myself, who wasn't meant to go to prison, could, and they still might have a chance to do better when they come out, could get roped in, and then that's them for life.
Were there any particular books that you read whilst you're in prison that maybe changed your mindset or got you to think a different type of way?
Loads of books around Buddhism. That super helped. That helped a lot. Loads of spiritual books. It's weird that I can't actually remember any books. That's bad of me. But I read loads of like business books, like how to start a business, marketing books, things like that. How to write a business plan. Books on mental health, how to understand my own mental health. Anything I could really get my hands on. I guess those are the themes that I feel like people should be reading. Books that invoke self-reflection, books that teach new philosophies, philosophy books. Oh my God, there should be philosophy courses in prison because it will give people a mental model, a lens, not to follow step by step, but just to have a perspective to live their life by. So philosophy, spirituality, and then educational books on business and marketing for me specifically really helped.
Have you heard about how Norway do their prison system?
Yes, quite clued up on how Norway do their prison system. So they don't take a draconian approach.
No.
Their whole philosophy is that getting sentenced is the punishment enough. And so the environment shouldn't be a punishment. So I actually worked with someone called Dr. Sarah Lewis, who was doing a growth project in the prison that I was in at the time. Really opened my eyes. She's a massive inspiration. She I guess was the trigger, the catalyst that made me want to move into the social impact space. And I'm not gonna butcher what she's doing in her PhD, but I know a lot of it is basing Nordic prison principles into the UK. So little things like having a nice space and a nice environment and how that affects people's rehabilitation positively. So they do murals and stuff in our prison, right? And I know in Norway they would give you a pet. Like there'd be a farm and you'd have to look after a chicken because it teaches you responsibility and accountability when you get out. And that reflects in their reoffending rates. So I may have butchered how Norway do it, but from my understanding, it's a lot more liberal is the word, like a more human approach.
More human.
Yeah.
They have a really interesting approach. I think like probably the biggest difference actually is for guards. So like in the UK and America, guards are trained that prison is full of really dangerous animals and they need to be contained. Now, on the face of it, I get it. If you're in a prison, there's rapists, paedophiles, serial murders. I get there's a section of society who are dangerous. I don't believe that's the case for most prisoners. And what Norway do is they train their guards in conversation. So the guards are trained to talk to the prisoners about football, about family, about school. And so instead of spending 23 hours pent up in a cell, you are having conversations with someone who's talking to you like a human being. So if you spend 2 years in prison in Norway, you haven't spent 2 years being treated like a farm animal. You spent 2 years being treated like a human, which in turn means when you come out of prison, there's a lower probability that you're coming out really screwed up. There's better chance to like reintegrate.
100%. So I actually train prison officers with a great organization called Unlock Graduates, and their whole thing is to get graduates who like high achieving graduates and give them a master's. It's a 2-year program where they get a master's, they train to be prison officers, and they do 1 to 2 years working in a prison. And the whole narrative is that this is a societal issue. It is a British problem because these people are going to be your postman. They're going to be your neighbor. They're going to be the person sitting next to your nan on the bus, right? So you want them to be primed to actually be productive in society, right? Rather than take away from it. And another part of the narrative is that after these 2 years, these graduates who have masters from Russell Group universities are going to be in high places in society, right? Even part of their program sets them up so they can work in high places in society. And they want them to take that narrative with them if they're going to be CEOs, senior consultants, whatever they're going to do in the next 5 years. So then there's a generation of people that look upon the prison system and prisoners more from a more human lens, if that makes sense. And I trained a lot of those graduates. So I feel like they're one company that is moving in the direction that you and I are talking about. And although it's not exactly the same as the Nordic principles, it's the closest thing I've seen in this country.
Yeah. It's really interesting because when I have these type of conversations, I get quite optimistic that there can be change because there's people like you with lived experience who've got really forward-thinking ideas about how to make our society more kind of interconnected and set people up for success. But on the flip side, I know people like you are a minority who come out of prison. Most people just don't have the tools to really get themselves back up like you do. Do you think Do you think there could be a systemic change? Like, do you get any inkling from predominantly like politicians and media that we could potentially shift to a Norway style?
Might not be an exact Nordic style. It'll be that, hopefully, that with a British spin on it, if that makes sense, because their culture is different anyway. The population sizes are smaller as well, I believe. Might be wrong, but this is from my gauge of it. There's definitely hope. There always should be hope because there's so many organizations in the space that are doing great work, and a lot of the work that they do is driven by hope. So I definitely think that's there. Loads of great corporate companies as well that work with government, that we work with, that help us bridge the gap between ours, like the people that my organization help them get into tech and things like that. So that's a massive thing. But like two things I wanted to touch on. So I was at an event, and someone was interviewing, say, like it was like an employability event where someone was interviewing someone who'd gone to prison, and he came up to me. He's like, I can never tell that these people have gone to prison. Like this whole event has opened my eyes, right? And I was like, look, let's think about it, right? Your life is, however, imagine your father died when you were 16, right? So rather than having to focus at school, you had to focus on being the breadwinner at home. That death spiraled your mum and your family's mental health. So you had to become the man of the house at 15, right? Because of your influences at the time, crime seemed like a good idea. Your values and your moral compass is the same as that individual, or the same as the version of you where your dad died when he was young, if that makes sense. The only difference is that person was forced to take another path. So I feel like the societal issue is blame that, oh, this person's in prison, so they're bad, right? And this can be, this might sound a bit controversial, this can be for the most horrendous, heinous crimes, right? Where there's actual like violent crimes and crimes of other nature as well. But we have to look at the human. What happened to that individual when they were a child, right? Why do they think doing these heinous things is okay? Did something happen to them? Were they abused in a certain way? Did they witness abuse in a certain way? So they're embedded to think that that is okay, right? From a psychological perspective, I feel like our early years and our primary caregivers really set the tone for the rest of our lives. And not everyone has protective characteristics, a nice family to grow up in. So they're already set up for failure. That doesn't mean they're inherently bad. I feel like if society makes that shift, right, then things can get better, because like we're a democratic country at the end, right? At the end of the day, right? If the public are educated on things like this, where look, you got person A, person B, right? Person A, they witnessed abuse, they were abused, so they went on to do these heinous things. But person B, they didn't, and they became, I don't know, like a doctor or a senior consultant or something like that. Both people are still technically good, but one just was given different tools, had different trauma that caused them to go in a certain way. That human understanding, I feel like, would really help. Like us get to not a more Nordic system, but a more human one.
Yeah, yeah.
But I feel like that shift is definitely happening, because lived experience wasn't a term when I was in prison. Now there's lived experience consultants, right, that are commissioned by the prison system to help them understand how to make the system better. So there's definitely a shift. There's still a long way to go, but it's an uphill battle, and it's a fight that hopefully will, I don't turn out for the better, let's say.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to prison. So when you were coming towards the end of your 2 years, did you have any idea what you wanted to do
So
when you came out?
actually, you serve half. So it wasn't the 2 years, and then good behavior out on tag. But did I have an idea? Yes, I did. But I was also thinking, am I going to do something on the side? But that was a very small part of me. But I thought university straight away. When I came home, I wanted to be a plumber. But then my family were like, we didn't come here for you to do a blue collar job. And I was like, plumbers earn more than you. So and they're probably the last to be replaced by AI now because of how things are happening. So it was education. It was get myself educated again. Someone told me, a staff member, that when you've come out of prison, the way the world sees you is they need to see other accolades to kind of counteract that. So it was straight education and to start a business of my own, because I thought, cool, I guess I'm entrepreneurial, and it would be difficult for me to thrive in a professional workplace because I've got a taint on my name now. So I thought entrepreneurship and education were the way to go, but also like bettering myself, right? Building human capital within myself, becoming more resilient, becoming more healthy, changing my perspective, right? It all starts there. I can read 1,000 books, I can get a highest paying job. If my habits aren't good, if I don't speak to myself properly, if I don't perceive the world in I'd say a proper way, that doesn't really tell you much, but let's just call it a proper way for now. We can dig into that if you want. But if you don't have all of those things that I see as human capital, there's no point it doesn't matter how much money you earn and how well you're educated. So that's step one. But even beyond that, I was lucky to have a home to go to. My rent was paid, all of those things. So like that's step one. But then step two is the human capital, and then step three is education, essentially. So those are the steps that I thought I'd take. And luckily enough for me, I was privileged enough to have step one taken care of because I can go home to my family.
I read that did you co-author a book with your best mate, Soberman?
Yeah. How to End the War on Drugs.
The War on Drugs.
Yeah, because I genuinely thought that, and I said it in court, and it probably didn't help. The judge was not happy because I told him about the book. I was like, and the whole narrative was like, mate, I shouldn't really be here because if I was born in Canada, maybe I'd be a million, I'd be making legal money. And at the time, the UK was the biggest exporter of cannabis. It's legal now medicinally, right? I've got health issues coming out of my ears. Although I'm not going to ever get prescription cannabis, I could if I wanted to. So understanding that and understanding the reasons as to why prohibition and drugs are illegal made me understand that it's a political and a class orientated thing as to why drugs are illegal. So I thought that narrative would help, and I thought it would be good to educate individuals on why drugs are illegal, because it is a war on drugs essentially, but flipping it on its head. So yeah, in practice, I thought it would work, but wrong audience. The judge. Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's so interesting. So drugs, they people use the term drugs as like an umbrella category.
It's a drug.
There's caffeine, there's nicotine, there's psilocybin, there's cannabis, there's crack cocaine, crystal meth. So in terms of my perspective, I believe it's much safer for society if the party drugs that we know people take, despite being illegal, it's probably a better idea if we actually regulate it and we produce those drugs which we know people consume safely in a lab where it's not laced with rat poison and whatever they put in it, which kills lots of university students, not just uni students, but anyone who takes kind of, whether it's ketamine, cocaine, ecstasy is a big one. And again, I'm not just talking about the UK, I'm talking about globally. It almost feels like there needs to be a separation out from the term with drugs. You've got psilocybin, which can really help veterans and people with mental health issues.
100%.
How do you view regulation and how we should tackle drugs?
I feel like the conversation needs to be had to figure out if that is a better way for society to work, if that makes sense. And maybe some sort of trials. I don't know. I might be unqualified to talk about it apart from my lived experience. But I'm sure there's examples around the world of countries where it's decriminalized and they have less drug issues. Like, I feel like it can go one of two ways, right? Like when spice was legal, that was causing massive issues on the street, right? So education needs to happen as well as regulation, if that makes sense. Because I get it. If people are going to do it, they're going to do it anyway. Wouldn't they rather go to a pharmacy to get it than some back alley dealer and like put themselves at risk? So yeah, I do definitely understand and appreciate that sentiment. Will it happen? God knows. But I definitely feel like a conversation needs to be had. And maybe that shift is happening. Imperial College have done studies on LSD, on psilocybin, on DMT to see how it helps people's mental health. Cannabis is technically legal medicinally in this country. People might not know it. So that shift is happening. It's probably going to be a slow burn. And if we look at history, once upon a time, alcohol was illegal in America, you know? So yeah, I feel like it could be helpful, but the education point is super important to protect young people and for them to understand that, cool, if we lived in a world where it's illegal, still kind of keep them away from it, if that makes sense. And then for it to be regulated because it's safe. So regulation is a big part of the conversation, but as I've said, the education part needs to be there, because we learned about drugs in school, in science, where they bring this little glass pane and they've got a spliff, they've got a little bit of hash, they've got a little bit of cocaine. But the way that I guess they talk about it could invoke curiosity in some people, if that makes sense. So and it's weird because I know people where they've grown up and their family, they have alcoholics in their family. They stay away from alcohol, right? I know people that didn't have alcoholics in their family and they're alcoholics now. And vice versa. Someone grew up and their dad's an alcoholic, but they're an alcoholic, which is why that education point is super important.
Yeah, addiction doesn't discriminate.
Yeah, 100%. It's very human. There's this YouTube channel called What If Autist, and he talks about taboo subjects around humans. And one of his points is addiction is such a taboo thing, but what if addiction is a core part of being human? Sugar. We're all addicted to it, whether we know it or not, right? So yeah, addiction doesn't discriminate, and I feel like addiction generally, there needs to be a better societal lens on it, a more human one, a more broad blanket one that doesn't discriminate the same way addiction doesn't.
Yeah. It's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, which we
it's
can
such a
have.
big rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Breakthrough Social. This is kind of this is your life now. This is your day to day.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what you guys do.
So we are a social enterprise who are an education provider, and we believe that we want to break barriers, build futures. We also believe that underserved communities need to be at the forefront of new technologies such as blockchain, such as AI, to shape it and use it to build a better life for themselves. And that's what we do globally, right? Educating underserved communities in, let's just use AI as an example, in technology such as AI. So we run courses, whether it's in Islington, where we are now, whether it's in other counties in the country, in prisons, even in Africa, to teach people from underserved communities to learn about these technologies, to not get left behind, and to actually use it to better their lives, whether that's from an educational perspective, an economic perspective, or a personal development perspective, because it's happening, it's already here, right? And it's super important for these communities not to get left behind, because it can really improve an individual's life. And I don't know where the world is headed with this AI race. And I think it's important from an ethical perspective and just from a general perspective for these communities to be at the forefront of it. Let's use prison as an example, right? I didn't expect to go prison. AI is already kind of used by the justice sector, very sparsely, a basic version of it to assess risk whilst you're in prison. I think it's unfair for people to be, for people's outcomes and how they're judged and how their risk is categorized through an algorithm, through numbers, which is why I feel like it's super important for people with lived experience to shape the AI that is going to shape our public sector, because the UK are leading it, and the UK are really influential and one of the top countries in AI. And I'm pretty sure that AI will shape how our public sector is run. So I feel like diverse voices need to be at the forefront of AI ethics. And when I say diverse, it doesn't mean the color of your skin. It can mean the diversity of your thought, your perspective and experience. So yeah, so that's, I know I went off on a tangent, but yeah, that's what we do. We educate underserved communities.
Yeah, it feels like what you're talking about is almost an anxiety where sections of society will be left behind if we don't do something in terms of education like you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, do you think this has the potential to leave huge swathes of society completely behind? I think we've always had polarization and social classes, upper, middle, working, lower. Do you see from kind of the education that you're delivering and what you know that this has the potential just to completely exacerbate all of that? And if you don't start learning now, you might be in trouble in 10 years.
Yeah, so silicon-based technologies have essentially kind of taken over. So think about it. Our silicon-based tech, yeah, so anything that is driven by a silicon chip, this sadly gets more attention than my family sometimes, my phone. We're building more data centers than we are hospitals. So we're in this age of the Silicon, right? Which is also, as I said before, an intersection of human spirituality, AI forcing humans to reassess how we see productivity and what is the best way to live. All these new biotech breakthroughs, no pun intended, that are happening, and other technologies like AI. So although there is definitely a dystopian future if people don't kind of wake up now, breakthroughs stand to build the utopian version of that, right? Where AI can be used to actually better the world, right? And all these technologies can be used to be a catalyst for human flourishing. And I feel like the way we get there is you educate the masses, okay, on the dangers of AI, how to kind of safeguard yourself, and then working with the people in power to ensure that all parts of society, underserved communities, are protected when AGI is here and loads of jobs are being taken, right? For us to already have plans in place. Unfortunately, if the public aren't aware of that, they're not going to know what to vote for. Do you get what I mean? They're not going to say if some candidate came and he's like, cool, I want to talk about how to safeguard our society from AI and make sure everyone's empowered and jobs don't get taken, rather than focusing on whatever's being focused on in the news. Right now, people are like, what's this guy talking about? Like, we're not going to vote for him because there's no education around the positives and the negatives of this new age and the art of the possible of what the Silicon could bring, or what this solar punk future could bring, where technology, nature, a new form of like human flourishing is embedded into one. The other side of it is tech feudalism, you know, where we're all controlled by an algorithm, not in a conspiratorial way, but most of us are already, whether you like it or know it or not, controlled by an algorithm in one way or another. So breakthroughs stand to help educate people to build that utopian future,
Yeah.
catalyzed by these new technologies, rather than us getting eaten up by it. And we're starting with the people who need it most, who are underserved communities. It's one thing I saw in prison. It's such a shame. We have so many smart people in there, yeah, that they were just given a wrong hand in life, poor influences, adverse childhood experiences, and then they end up in prison. They're labeled in society as criminals. They come out, they don't really know what to do, and then they're in that cycle. They're in that revolving door, if that makes sense. So, and it's the same for people from underserved backgrounds, right? So many talented individuals that could make a positive change in the world that just don't seem to have the tools in front of them. And that's, I guess, a big part of the reason why we exist.
Last question. If we eliminate all biases from a large language learning model, do you foresee a world where we have an AI government, meaning a language, an agentic AI would consider all of the perspectives of an entire society, and it would have the ability to allocate capital without having corrupt pressures, and serving the interest of general society rather than the minority?
I think more than just biases being removed needs to happen for that to be true. It's the public knowing all the pitfalls of that, the risks of that being framed as this is what we're going to do, but really and truly there's an ulterior motive. The power is with the people, if that makes sense, because we're a democratic society, right? Whether or not loads of conspiracy theorists may not want to believe it, so that can happen, but I think it's more than just removing the biases, right? It's people with diverse voices, diverse perspectives, and this, when I say diversity, it's not just skin color. You can be from any background and have a diverse perspective, being at the forefront of all of this, right? Educating the masses. So there's even when you're talking about this utopian future, there's going to be some bad actors. There's going to be power hungry people that don't really care about other humans, right? To kind of counteract that force, to be like, cool, we have some agentic AI government, we remove the biases, it sounds great, but then someone can easily go in and like, who's building that? Does that make sense? There's that question. And who's regulating the people that are building that? There's all of these questions. Definitely possible. I feel like it starts with education and putting the right people at the forefront of this for that to happen. And I guess, yeah, that is why we exist. And I love this conversation because at times when I'm running the delivery function, the educational delivery function at Breakthrough, and it can be stressful, right? But conversations like this really reinforce the mission and why I get up every day and why sometimes I might be a little bit sleep deprived and things like that, because I'm getting up out of bed to build this future, you know?
Yeah. Oh, Pratik, we're going to have to get a second
Yeah,
conversation booked in because I want to continue that conversation on drugs,
100%.
how we could shape that, and then also like AI. There's just so much I want to unpack. But honestly, thank you for your time. Your story is amazing. Like I said a bit earlier on, I think it's a shame that people like you are in the minority, where you go to prison and you come out and now you're working on something amazing. Like, most people work on really boring stuff, and what you and your best mate are doing together is like so interesting. So.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be possible without our team. The team's amazing. All our stakeholders, the partners, the corporate companies that take a bet on us and believe in our mission as well. Yes, him and I guess, restarted it and reignited Breakthrough, I don't know, 16 months ago, but it wouldn't be possible without all the great people around us. So if you're watching, thank you, and you better have got to this far, I'm hoping. But yeah.
We'll put a link in the description below for anyone to check out. But yeah, Pratik, thank you.
Perfect, thank you.